In the vast and unforgiving darkness of the Second World War skies, where bomber crews lived minute to minute between survival and oblivion, few stories rise above the relentless thunder of engines and the blaze of flak. Yet among the countless missions flown, one moment, one impossible act, burned itself into history with a brilliance no enemy fire could extinguish. It was the night when a young New Zealand pilot, scarcely 22 years old, climbed onto the wing of a burning bomber thousands of feet above enemy territory. He did not act out of glory, nor out of desperation, but out of a quiet, unwavering conviction that the lives of his crew mattered more than his own. James Allen Ward was neither a born warrior nor a man shaped for legend. Before the war he was a teacher, a quiet figure in a classroom, far from the roaring engines and deadly skies of Europe. But war transforms the ordinary, and in its crucible, some reveal depths of courage unsuspected even to themselves. Ward's decision to fight the fire spreading along the wing of his Wellington, by crawling into the slipstream with nothing but a rope around his waist and a piece of canvas in his hands, defied every principle of survival and every law of logic. What he accomplished that night would save his crew, earn him the Victoria Cross, and echo long after his life was cut short. His story is not simply one of heroism, it is a testament to the extraordinary strength that can emerge from the most unassuming of men. James Allen Ward was born in Wanganui, New Zealand, in 1919, a quiet and unassuming boy whose early life offered little hint of the extraordinary courage he would later display. He grew up in a modest household shaped by the rhythms of small-town life, enveloped by fields, rivers, and the ever-present realities of a country still defining its identity in the interwar period. Nothing about his childhood suggested that he would one day earn the Victoria Cross for an act of self-sacrifice and determination that defied the limits of physical courage. His teachers remembered him as diligent, polite, and introspective. He was not the sort of youth who flourished in spectacle or sought attention, rather, he demonstrated the more subtle qualities of consistency, responsibility, and loyalty. After finishing his secondary schooling, he trained as a teacher, entering a profession marked by steady routines and a sense of civic duty. Teaching, however, was not the path that fate had designed for him once the world plunged toward conflict. When the Second World War erupted in 1939, New Zealand, as a member of the Commonwealth, aligned itself automatically with Britain. Young men across the country volunteered for service, motivated by a mixture of loyalty to the Empire, a sense of impending threat, and the call to adventure that war so often presents to the youth of a peaceful nation. Ward was not among the earliest to enlist, perhaps owing to his reserved nature or the obligations of his teaching work, but eventually he felt compelled to serve. The war expanded rapidly across Europe and North Africa, and New Zealand's air forces were increasingly needed to support Britain. Living nearly halfway around the world from the conflict did not dampen the sense of urgency felt by its citizens. By early 1941, Ward had joined the Royal New Zealand Air Force and was soon selected for training as an airman pilot. Ward's aviation training took place at a time when instruction had shifted from the measured pace of peacetime flight schools to the accelerated tempo of wartime necessity. His instructors noted his dependability, attention to detail, and seriousness of purpose. He progressed steadily, neither excelling in flamboyant fashion nor struggling as some did with the demands of navigation, instrument flying, and the complexities of multi-crew coordination. He was the sort of trainee who did what was required without complaint and assimilated information as it came. These qualities would later prove decisive in moments of unimaginable stress. After initial flight training, Ward departed for the United Kingdom under the Empire Air Training Scheme, joining thousands of young pilots, gunners, navigators, and radio operators crossing oceans to support the Royal Air Force. When he arrived in Britain, the Battle of Britain had been won, but the nighttime bombing campaigns were intensifying. Bomber Command's operations required constant replenishment of trained crews, losses were high, and missions over occupied Europe were fraught with danger. Ward was assigned to No. 75, New Zealand, Squadron, one of the few units in the RAF primarily composed of New Zealanders. The squadron flew Wellington bombers, twin-engined aircraft with geodetic construction that allowed them to absorb significant damage, though they were far from invulnerable. Life in a bomber squadron was a strange mixture of routine and terror. Crews spent their days attending briefings, refining navigation skills, practicing emergency procedures, and maintaining their aircraft, but each night they faced the possibility of not returning. Ward quickly integrated into the squadron, earning respect from his peers for his steady temperament and calm manner. Bomber crews depended on one another profoundly, relying on precise teamwork in moments of crisis. Ward's reliability made him a valuable member of his crew, and though relatively young, he carried himself with the maturity of someone who understood the stakes of every mission. By mid-1941, Bomber Command missions involved deep penetrations into German-occupied territory, targeting industrial centers and transportation hubs operating under blackout conditions and defended by anti-aircraft artillery and night fighters. The nature of the Wellington bomber placed particular demands on its pilots, who had to manage both engines, maintain formation when required, navigate to and from target areas, and keep the aircraft stable during bombing runs. The aircraft's geodetic frame offered structural resilience but also created challenges when damage compromised specific sections. On the night of July 7, 1941, Ward's crew received orders to participate in a raid over Münster, an industrial city in northwest Germany. The mission was understood to be hazardous, but by the standards of the time, it was routine. The Wellington they flew, like most others, bore the accumulated scars of previous operations, repairs patched over with fabric and doped coatings. The crew prepared with the familiar mix of anxiety and professionalism that experience had taught them. Ward, as second pilot, occupied a role that required readiness to assume control of the aircraft whenever needed. The weather forecast was acceptable, though German air defenses were expected to be intense, as always. After takeoff, the journey toward the target proceeded without incident for much of the outbound flight. The crew maintained radio silence, navigated through darkness occasionally brightened by moonlight, and remained alert to the presence of enemy night fighters. As the bomber neared Münster, searchlights probed the sky, anti-aircraft guns opened fire, and the city below appeared as a faint patch of gloom punctuated by the bursts of defensive fire. Ward's pilot, Sergeant Jack Widowson, guided the Wellington through the barrage, maintaining steady altitude and speed. The bomb run was executed, and the aircraft released its payload, completing the primary objective of the mission. But the danger did not diminish with the dropping of bombs. The return journey was often the most perilous part of any operation. Shortly after leaving the target area, the Wellington encountered a German night fighter. In a sudden swoop, the fighter positioned itself beneath the bomber's blind spot and fired upward, striking the underside and causing severe structural and mechanical damage. The attack ignited a fire near the starboard engine and along part of the wing. Flames threatened to spread rapidly across the doped fabric and geodetic frame. Inside the aircraft, crew members felt the jolt of impact and smelled smoke. The bomber lurched, struggling to maintain altitude. Fire in the wing presented a catastrophic threat. If it spread to the fuel tanks or compromised the structural integrity of the spar, the aircraft would almost certainly break apart. Ward and his crewmates faced a dire situation. Standard firefighting measures were insufficient. The fire was external, burning along the wing surface, inaccessible from inside. The flames continued to grow in intensity, whipped backward by the airflow. If not extinguished quickly, the crew would have to abandon the aircraft, and survival over enemy territory at night was far from assured. Parachuting into Germany or the occupied Netherlands carried the risk of injury, capture, or death. At this moment, Ward acted with instinctive decisiveness. He proposed climbing out onto the wing to smother the fire manually. The idea bordered on impossible. The Wellington was flying at altitude, buffeted by wind, darkness, and the slipstream of the moving aircraft. Any movement outside risked being blown off the wing into the night sky. But the crew recognized that conventional options were exhausted. Ward, though not physically imposing, possessed exceptional determination. He retrieved a parachute for safety and began preparing to exit through the astrodome, a small blister on top of the fuselage normally used for celestial navigation. With the assistance of the crew, a rope was tied around Ward's waist, a desperate measure intended to prevent him from being swept away. The Astrodome was opened, and freezing air blasted into the cockpit. Ward climbed out onto the fuselage, gripping handholds where he could find them. The slipstream tugged at him, threatening to pry him loose with every movement. The aircraft's vibrations traveled through the thin metal and fabric beneath him. Yet he persevered, inching forward along the curved surface toward the burning wing. The Wellington's wing presented an even more precarious environment. It was smooth, angled, and soaked in wind forces that intensified with proximity to the burning section. Ward, clinging to the aircraft with one hand while holding a canvas cover with the other, attempted to smother the flames by pressing the cover against the fire. His efforts were hindered by the ferocity of the wind, which tore at the cover and lifted it away repeatedly. He managed to secure a foothold near the wing root, bracing himself as best as possible without being blown free. Through repeated attempts, he pressed the canvas into the burning fabric, extinguishing part of the fire. Every movement required tremendous physical exertion against the slipstream. Flames continued to flare, but Ward was able to eliminate enough of the fire to prevent it from spreading to the aircraft's main structure. Though he could not extinguish the fire entirely, his action stabilized the situation. The remaining embers burned themselves out without reaching the fuel tanks or critical components. Once Ward had done as much as possible, he began the return journey along the fuselage. The danger remained acute, any misstep could send him tumbling into darkness. Crew members watched anxiously from inside, ready to pull him back as soon as he reached the Astrodome. With extraordinary effort, Ward managed to crawl back to safety, exhausted and battered by the wind. His face bore marks from the freezing air, and his hands were numb, but he had succeeded in performing one of the most remarkable acts of selfless bravery in the history of aerial warfare. The pilot regained control of the damaged aircraft, nursing it through the remainder of the flight across hostile terrain and over the North Sea. Despite the damage and the degraded aerodynamics of the wing, the Wellington remained airborne, a testament to its geodetic construction and to the heroism of Ward, whose actions had prevented a catastrophic in-flight breakup. The aircraft eventually reached England and made a safe landing, an outcome that astonished those who inspected the damage afterward. Ward's courage became the subject of immediate attention. News of the event spread throughout the squadron and then through the wider RAF. Bomber command personnel, who understood the unique perils of their trade, recognized the magnitude of what he had accomplished. His act was not merely brave, it was unprecedented. Climbing onto a bomber mid-flight, in darkness and under combat conditions, defied all expectations of survivability. It required physical endurance, mental clarity, and moral resolve of the highest order. Many would have abandoned the aircraft or accepted the inevitability of destruction, but Ward chose to risk his life to save his crew. In recognition of his actions, Ward was recommended for the Victoria Cross, the highest award for gallantry in the face of the enemy within Commonwealth military forces. The award was approved, making him the first member of the Royal New Zealand Air Force to receive the honour during the Second World War. The citation highlighted not only the extraordinary nature of his deed but also the humility with which he had undertaken it. Ward himself reportedly minimized his actions, suggesting that he merely did what had to be done, a reflection of his modest character. Despite the acclaim, Ward's war was not yet over. In the weeks following the Munster mission, he continued flying operations with his squadron. His fellow crew members regarded him with deep admiration, though he remained the same quiet, conscientious individual he had always been. The demands on bomber crews did not diminish, and losses remained high. Ward faced each mission with the same sense of duty that had characterized his service from the beginning. Tragically, Ward's life was cut short on September 15, 1941, when his aircraft was shot down over Hamburg. The Wellington failed to return from the mission, and for several days there was uncertainty about the fate of Ward and his crew. Eventually, confirmation arrived that they had perished. Ward was 22 years old. His death underscored the relentless toll of the air war, which claimed countless young lives regardless of their heroism or skill. Yet Ward's legacy endured. His story became emblematic of the courage displayed by aircrew during the Second World War. For New Zealanders, he represented the finest qualities of their nation: quiet determination, selflessness, and bravery without spectacle. His Victoria Cross stood as a testament to the sacrifices made by a small country far from the centers of conflict but deeply committed to the struggle for freedom. In the decades following the war, Ward's actions continued to inspire generations of service members and civilians alike. His story has been retold in military histories, biographies, and museum exhibits. Within the RNZAF and the RAF, his name remains synonymous with extraordinary gallantry. Commemorations, memorials, and educational programs highlight his example as one of the greatest acts of courage in aviation history. Ward's decision to climb onto the wing of a burning aircraft was not born of recklessness but of a profound sense of responsibility toward his crew. It reflected a level of moral conviction that transcends ordinary definitions of bravery. His actions were rooted in an unwavering commitment to others, an understanding that survival depended on collective effort, and a refusal to accept defeat even when confronted with near-certain destruction. Such qualities illuminate the deeper dimensions of wartime heroism, where courage is not merely a matter of adrenaline or instinct but of character. The structural design of the Wellington bomber, with its geodetic lattice framework, provided a certain resilience under fire, but it was Ward's intervention that kept the aircraft intact long enough to return home. Engineers and historians have since studied the event as an extraordinary case of human-machine interaction under extreme conditions. The combination of design features, crew coordination, and Ward's individual actions coalesced to produce an outcome that defied probability. Yet the technical aspects cannot overshadow the human element. It was Ward's willingness to confront fear and embrace danger for the sake of others that transformed the episode into legend. Those who served with Ward recalled him not as a flamboyant hero but as a thoughtful and considerate comrade. His training as a teacher had imbued him with patience and empathy, qualities valued in the close confines of a bomber crew. In many ways, his heroism stemmed from these same attributes: a sense of duty, an understanding of responsibility, and a commitment to protecting those entrusted to him. His life, though brief, offered a model of service that extended beyond the battlefield. The context of the air war further underscores the significance of Ward's actions. Bomber Command missions in 1941 were fraught with danger, with crews facing not only enemy fire but also mechanical failures, navigation challenges, and the ever-present risks of weather and darkness. Survival often hinged on quick thinking and teamwork. Within this environment, Ward's willingness to undertake a nearly impossible task demonstrated the highest level of initiative and courage. His actions also contributed to the evolving understanding of crew resource management, highlighting the importance of adaptability, communication, and individual initiative within complex operational systems. Ward's story has resonated across time partly because it embodies the paradoxes of war, the presence of nobility within destruction, the emergence of individual heroism amid collective suffering, and the capacity of ordinary people to perform extraordinary deeds. His quiet demeanor and lack of theatrical flair make his courage more relatable and more profound. He did not seek fame, he acted because he believed it was necessary. This authenticity reinforces the power of his example. New Zealand, a nation of modest population and geographical isolation, has long nurtured a tradition of producing soldiers and airmen of remarkable caliber. Ward's inclusion among the country's most celebrated military figures reflects not only his individual achievements but also the broader contributions of New Zealand forces during the war. His Victoria Cross stands alongside those awarded to other New Zealanders across theaters of conflict, symbolizing the country's commitment to shared ideals of freedom and justice. After the war, Ward's family and community honored his memory through commemorations, plaques, and public ceremonies. Schools and civic organizations recounted his story to younger generations, emphasizing the values he embodied. Historians chronicled his life in detailed accounts, ensuring that his example would not fade from public memory. Aviation museums preserved artifacts related to his service, allowing visitors to understand the environment in which he operated and the challenges he faced. Internationally, Ward's story remains a touchstone within the broader narrative of the RAF's wartime sacrifices. The Royal Air Force Museum and various memorials include references to his heroic deed, and scholars of military history cite his actions as among the most extraordinary personal interventions in the bomber war. His name appears in discussions of gallantry, moral courage, and the psychology of heroism under extreme conditions. Ward's courage also influenced post-war military training programs, particularly in the realm of emergency procedures and crew dynamics. While no modern Air Force would expect or permit a pilot to climb onto a wing in flight, the underlying principles of resourcefulness, risk assessment, and decisive action remain central to military aviation. Ward's example has been used in leadership training to illustrate the importance of initiative, the willingness to confront danger, and the imperative of placing the welfare of others above one's own. In reflecting on Ward's life, it becomes clear that his story is not solely about one dramatic moment but about the constellation of values that shaped him: humility, perseverance, duty, and compassion. His upbringing in New Zealand, his training as a teacher, his service in the RNZAF, and his integration into the RAF all contributed to the formation of a character capable of extraordinary action. He was not defined by heroism, rather, his heroism emerged naturally from who he was. The night of July 7, 1941 remains a singular episode in the annals of aviation history. Ward's climb onto the wing, buffeted by wind and surrounded by flame, symbolizes the intersection of human courage and technological vulnerability. It illustrates the perpetual struggle between destruction and survival, between despair and hope. It shows that even in moments of overwhelming danger, individuals can act in ways that defy expectation and transform outcomes. Ward's death only months after receiving the Victoria Cross adds a layer of poignancy to his legacy. His life was one of promise and dedication, cut short by the unforgiving reality of war. Yet the brevity of his life does not diminish its impact. Through his actions, he left an indelible mark on the history of New Zealand, the RAF, and the global memory of the Second World War. As the decades pass, the world continues to grapple with the legacy of the war that shaped the mid-20th century. Stories like Ward's offer insight into the human dimension of that conflict, reminding us that the war was fought not by abstract forces but by individuals who faced choices that tested the limits of courage and sacrifice. Ward's decision to risk his life to save his crew stands as one of the most compelling examples of such choices. His courage bridges the gap between ordinary life and extraordinary circumstances, illustrating the potential for greatness within the humble and the unassuming. Today, James Allen Ward is remembered not only as a war hero but also as a symbol of the quiet strength that underlies acts of profound bravery. His story endures because it captures the essence of selfless service, the power of determination, and the enduring human capacity to confront fear with resolve. Through memorials, writings, and historical scholarship, his legacy continues to inspire those who seek to understand the nature of courage. Ward's life invites reflection on the nature of heroism itself. Heroism is often associated with dramatic gestures or exceptional physical strength, but Ward demonstrated that true heroism arises from moral conviction and the willingness to act when circumstances demand it. His bravery was not the result of a desire for recognition but of an inner commitment to his companions and his mission. That is why his story resonates so deeply. It reminds us that courage is not an extraordinary quality possessed only by a select few, but a potential within every individual, awakened in moments of necessity. Through the lens of history, Ward's actions have taken on a mythic quality, yet they remain grounded in the factual record of an event witnessed and verified by his crew, his squadron, and the RAF. This combination of factual certainty and symbolic power gives his story its enduring force. It is at once a concrete incident in the chronology of the war and a timeless illustration of the human spirit's capacity for sacrifice. In the end, Ward's act of climbing onto the burning wing of a Wellington bomber exemplifies the highest ideals of military service and human empathy. It stands as a testament to the bond shared by those who face danger together, to the sense of responsibility that compels individuals to protect one another, and to the profound depths of courage that war can reveal. Ward may have been a modest young man from New Zealand, but his actions reached far beyond the circumstances of his life, becoming part of the collective human heritage of courage and sacrifice. As long as history remembers the Second World War, the name of James Allen Ward will remain synonymous with selfless bravery. His story will continue to be told, not because it glorifies war, but because it illuminates the best of what humanity can be in the darkest of times. The legacy of James Allen Ward did not end with the final moments of his brief life, nor with the wreckage of the Wellington in which he perished over Hamburg. Instead, it expanded outward, shaping how future generations understood the trajectory of wartime aviation, the ethos of Commonwealth service, and the moral dimensions of individual sacrifice. The months following his death witnessed a slow but persistent process of memorialization, as his squadron, the RNZAF community, and the wider RAF grappled with the loss of a man whose courage had inspired not only his contemporaries but also military leadership across the Commonwealth. His Victoria Cross had been awarded only weeks before his final mission, and news of his death carried a pronounced sense of tragedy, underscoring the relentless nature of the conflict that claimed even its most extraordinary individuals. In New Zealand, the confirmation of Ward's fate reverberated across the national consciousness. Newspapers carried the story, emphasizing both his heroism and the cost of war. For many New Zealand families, his name became emblematic of the sacrifices made by a small Pacific nation contributing men and resources far from its shores. His alma mater, the Teachers' College where he had trained before the war, held special assemblies to honor him, reflecting on the quiet student who had once walked those halls with no expectation of one day becoming a symbol of national pride. Many who had known him before the war struggled to reconcile the mild, studious young teacher with the pilot who had crawled across the wing of a burning bomber in flight. Ward's family, grieving yet proud, became the custodians of his memory. His parents received letters from officers who had served with him, each offering glimpses into his conduct, his personality, and the reverence with which his comrades regarded him. The return of personal items, such as his uniform insignia, flight logs, and photographs, transformed their home into a living archive of his short but impactful life. Over time, these items would be shared with museums and historical institutions, allowing the public to understand the man through the artifacts he left behind. Within No. 75, New Zealand, Squadron, Ward's loss was keenly felt. His crew members, those who had survived earlier missions with him, carried forward the psychological weight of his example. In a unit that faced frequent casualties, maintaining morale required a delicate balance of stoicism, camaraderie, and remembrance. Ward's bravery became a point of reference during mission briefings and training sessions. Instructors emphasized his decision-making under pressure, using his actions as an example of the initiative required in emergencies. Yet no one attempted to replicate his feat. All understood that what he had done was singular and unrepeatable under normal operational doctrine. The emphasis was symbolic rather than procedural. Ward represented the moral courage that aircrew were asked to embody. The months following Ward's death brought increasing intensity to the bomber offensive. The RAF's night raids expanded in scale and ambition, eventually evolving into the area bombing strategies that would define the later years of the conflict. Technological advancements, such as improved radar, stronger defensive armaments, and the introduction of four-engined heavy bombers, changed the nature of the air war. But even as technology advanced, the psychological dimension of aircrew experience remained constant. The stories of those like Ward provided mental fortitude to new recruits, grounding them in a tradition of resilience that transcended technical skill. In the broader context of wartime propaganda and national morale, Ward's story held significant symbolic value. The British government, recognizing the power of his sacrifice, included references to him in speeches, publications, and educational materials designed to reinforce public support for the war effort. For a Commonwealth population enduring rationing, conscription, and the fear of invasion, accounts of individual heroism offered reassurance that their servicemen were fighting with exceptional courage. Ward was not portrayed as larger than life but rather as an ordinary man who rose to extraordinary heights, a narrative that resonated deeply during a time when countless families were enduring uncertainty about the fates of their loved ones. In military circles, Ward's Victoria Cross citation became an instructional document. Officers discussed the event in seminars on leadership, risk assessment, and emergency response, examining the conditions that had driven him to act. Some analysts focused on the technical aspects, the structural vulnerabilities of the Wellington, the dynamics of in-flight fire, and the aerodynamic forces that would have confronted Ward. Others concentrated on psychological factors, his sense of responsibility, situational awareness, and the moral calculus that drove him to risk death for the survival of his crew. These discussions contributed to the evolving body of military psychology that would influence post-war training doctrines. Ward's legacy also influenced wartime correspondence between New Zealand and Britain. Letters from political leaders acknowledged the courage of New Zealand servicemen, often citing Ward as the embodiment of their contributions. His story became part of diplomatic narratives reinforcing the partnership between Britain and its Commonwealth forces. Prime Minister Peter Fraser of New Zealand referenced Ward in speeches, using his example as evidence of the nation's commitment to shared values of freedom and resistance to tyranny. In post-war years, the story of James Allen Ward continued to evolve as historians gained access to operational records, eyewitness accounts, and declassified materials. Researchers analyzed the Munster raid in detail, scrutinizing mission logs, German night fighter records, and technical assessments of the damage sustained by Ward's Wellington. These studies confirmed the extraordinary nature of the event, reaffirming the accuracy of the official citation and the credibility of the crew's testimony. The combination of technical analysis and personal accounts created a multidimensional understanding of Ward's actions, blending the mechanical realities of wartime aviation with the human elements that shaped decision-making in critical moments. As modern aviation technology advanced, Ward's feat took on an increasingly surreal quality. The idea of climbing onto the exterior of an aircraft in flight became almost unimaginable in an era of pressurized cabins, jet engines, and precision-engineered airframes. Yet this very contrast enhanced his legacy, reminding successive generations of the raw physicality and elemental danger of early military aviation. Museums highlighted this difference in their exhibits, juxtaposing Ward's Wellington with modern aircraft to illustrate the evolution of both technology and the nature of aerial warfare. In the decades that followed, various commemorative efforts helped preserve Ward's memory. His Victoria Cross was displayed in a place of honor, ensuring that visitors could understand the significance of his sacrifice. Plaques were installed at his former school and in public spaces, offering succinct accounts of his actions to passers-by. Each commemoration served as a point of connection between the present and the past, allowing individuals to encounter Ward's story in everyday settings. Educational institutions used Ward's life as a case study in subjects ranging from history to ethics. Students examined the moral implications of his actions, discussing the motivations behind self-sacrifice and the circumstances under which individuals exceed normal expectations of courage. Teachers emphasized that Ward's heroism did not stem from a desire for glory but from a deep sense of duty and loyalty. In this way, his example became a teaching tool, helping young people explore broader themes of responsibility, service, and leadership. Ward's name also appeared in military scholarship discussing the concept of heroic agency, the idea that individuals can dramatically alter the outcome of a situation through decisive action. His willingness to act against overwhelming odds demonstrated the unpredictable but profound role that personal initiative can play in group survival. This idea informed post-war discussions about the value of empowering individuals within hierarchical organizations, fostering a culture where soldiers and aircrew felt capable of making critical decisions regardless of rank. As memorial culture developed in the late 20th century, Ward's story found renewed relevance. Historians and curators sought to bring greater attention to lesser-known Commonwealth heroes, balancing narratives often dominated by British, American, or German figures. Ward became an exemplar of the contributions made by small nations whose servicemen fought alongside larger powers. His story offered a counterbalance to narratives focused on strategic bombings, emphasizing the human dimension of the air war. In New Zealand, particularly, Ward's reputation experienced a resurgence as part of a broader cultural effort to highlight national identity within global history. His courage was interpreted not merely as a wartime anecdote but as an expression of values often associated with New Zealanders: humility, resourcefulness, perseverance, and a quiet determination to help others. Schools integrated his story into curricula exploring New Zealand's role in the World Wars, ensuring that students understood not only the strategic aspects of the conflict but also the personal sacrifices made by individuals. Ward's legacy also inspired artistic interpretations in literature, documentaries, and museum installations. Writers explored the psychological nuances of his bravery, while filmmakers recreated the Munster incident with attention to both technical accuracy and emotional resonance. These works helped broaden the public's understanding of Ward's humanity, portraying him not simply as a symbol but as a young man confronted with an impossible choice. In the early 21st century, digital archives and online platforms further expanded access to Ward's story. Digitization of squadron records, photographs, and official documents allowed researchers and the general public to study his life with unprecedented depth. Online communities of aviation enthusiasts and historians analyzed the structural details of the Wellington, reconstructing the probable airflow patterns and physical stresses Ward faced on the wing. These reconstructions, though technical, emphasized the extraordinary difficulty of his actions and deepened appreciation for his determination. Ward's memory remains intertwined with the evolving narrative of the Second World War. As global perspectives on the conflict continue to shift, his story stands as a reminder of the personal dimension that underlies sweeping historical events. While strategies, campaigns, and geopolitical forces shape the course of history, individuals like Ward illuminate the human experiences that give meaning to those broader processes. Though he did not survive the war, his legacy endures through every retelling of his story, every study of his mission, every visitor who sees his Victoria Cross, and every student who encounters his example of selflessness. His courage continues to transcend time, serving as a testament to the values that guide individuals in moments of greatest peril. In the collective memory of New Zealand, the Royal Air Force, and the global community of those who study the Second World War, James Allen Ward remains a beacon of moral and physical bravery, a symbol of the extraordinary heights that ordinary individuals can reach when confronted with extraordinary challenges.